I woke up to something strange. Not my usual alarm, not the rooster, not the sound of cows lowing in the distance. No, it was music. Classical music. The soft hum of a string quartet playing some fancy wedding tune. My brain wasn't fully awake yet, but something felt wrong. I sat up, rubbed my eyes, and listened harder. Laughter. Clinking glasses. A whole lot of voices. Way too many voices. I frowned. It was a normal morning when I went to bed last night, so why the hell did it sound like a wedding was happening outside my house? I threw off my blanket and stumbled over to the window, and that's when my brain finally caught up to reality. What the hell? My yard, my private property, had somehow transformed into a full-blown wedding venue overnight. Rows of white chairs stretched across my lawn in perfect formation. A huge, flower-covered arch stood proudly near my barn, draped in elegant fabrics, like something out of a fairy tale. A catering crew had set up a buffet table near my porch, on my land, slicing fruit, arranging champagne glasses, and fanning out expensive hors d'oeuvres like they belonged there. A small army of wedding planners bustled around, straightening decorations and adjusting centerpieces. There was even a freaking valet station near my driveway, where some guy in a vest was parking cars on my field. Like this was some five-star resort. I was still trying to wrap my head around what I was seeing when I spotted her. Karen. Of course it was Karen. There she stood, clipboard in hand, marching around like a self-appointed queen, barking orders at everyone like she owned the place. My blood pressure spiked. I grabbed the closest pair of jeans, yanked on my boots, and stormed outside. The second my foot hit the gravel, my nostrils flared. Flowers, perfume, fancy catered food. My land didn't smell like this. My land smelled like fresh air, dirt, and livestock. And now? Now it smelled like an overpriced wedding. I stomped toward the madness, dodging a waiter carrying a tray of shrimp cocktails, and zeroed in on Karen. She was chatting with a well-dressed couple, smiling like she was running some exclusive event. I didn't even bother with pleasantries. Karen, what the hell is going on? She turned to me unfazed and flashed the fakest smile I'd ever seen. Oh, Jake, good morning. I stared at her. Don't good morning me. Why is there a wedding in my yard? She waved a hand, completely dismissing my rage. Oh, don't be dramatic. It's just a small wedding. We needed the perfect outdoor venue, and your yard was just so lovely. I cut her off. Karen, this is my land. She scoffed like I was being unreasonable. Jake, it's one day, and for such an important couple. Sophia and James, prestigious family, very well connected. She said it like that was supposed to mean something to me. Like I was supposed to care. I crossed my arms. I don't care who they are. I didn't give you permission for this. Karen rolled her eyes. Oh, come on, Jake. We tried calling you. No, you didn't. Well, maybe we couldn't reach you, but the community needed this, she insisted, waving her clipboard. This is for the good of the HOA. I let out a dry laugh. Karen, I am not in the HOA. She dismissed that with a wave. Technicalities. At that moment, the bride and groom approached, smiling at me like I was the hired help. You must be Jake, the bride said brightly. Thank you so much for letting us use your land. It's breathtaking. I clenched my jaw. I didn't let you use anything. Karen set this up without asking me. The groom, a guy in a ridiculously expensive suit, chuckled and clapped me on the shoulder like we were old pals. Oh, come on, man. No harm, no foul, right? It's just one day. He gestured at the chairs. Besides, we already paid for everything. I narrowed my eyes. Paid? To who? Karen, smirking now, chimed in. To the HOA, of course. A very reasonable fee if I do say so myself. I stared at her. She charged people to use my land. She made money off of my property. I took a slow breath, my hands clenching into fists. Oh, and by the way, Karen added, flipping a page on her clipboard. The catering trucks had trouble parking, so we had them use your driveway. Hope that's not a problem. I turned. My driveway was completely blocked. Multiple vans, trucks, and a damn limousine sat parked in my space. There was no way I could move my truck if I needed to. Karen smiled at me like she had just solved world hunger. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a wedding to oversee. She patted my arm like I was some misbehaving child. Why don't you just go inside and relax? It'll all be over soon. I let out a slow breath. Then I pulled out my phone. Hey, I said when my farmhand picked up. Open the back gate and let them out. There was a pause. All of them? I glanced at Karen, who was now basking in the attention of arriving guests. Every single one dot. I hung up and waited. A minute passed, then another. The first sign of trouble was the sudden silence from the catering staff. One of them, a chef in a black cap, pointed toward the barn. Then came a loud, deep moo, and another. And then the ground rumbled. A wave of cows burst through the open gate, hooves thundering across the grass, barreling straight into the wedding. One of them crashed into the floral arch, sending flowers and fabric flying. Another one trampled through the aisle, knocking over chairs like bowling pins. Diesel, my biggest bull, locked eyes on the wedding cake. He charged. The bride let out an ear-splitting scream just as Diesel's massive head collided with the cake, sending it exploding into the air. White frosting, pink flowers, $1,000 masterpiece, destroyed in seconds. The groom stumbled backward, his pristine suit now splattered with cake. Karen, now red-faced and shrieking, turned toward me. Jackie! Stop them! I popped a shrimp into my mouth. Huh. Looks like my cows didn't get the wedding invite. Guess they wanted to crash the party. And that was just the beginning. The screaming had barely started when the goats joined in. Now, if you don't know anything about goats, let me tell you, they thrive on chaos. While the guests were busy dodging cows and trying to keep their designer shoes out of manure, my goats were already infiltrating the wedding with the enthusiasm of tiny, four-legged criminals. One of them, a little troublemaker named Nacho, leapt onto the gift table, sending neatly wrapped presents flying through the air. A silver-wrapped box crashed into the groom's head, making him stumble. A bridesmaid shrieked as another goat grabbed the hem of her dress and started chewing, completely unbothered by the human panic happening around him. A third goat had somehow climbed onto the DJ's sound system. Now, I don't know if it was on purpose, or if he just liked the way it felt under his hooves, but this little guy managed to stomp all over the controls, turning the elegant string quartet into a glitchy, unholy remix of distorted classical music. The guests were in full meltdown mode. One woman in a fancy pink dress was clutching her pearls, trying to climb onto a chair as if that would somehow save her from the barnyard invasion. The mother of the bride was screeching in horror as her carefully curated floral arrangements were being eaten in real time by a very happy cow named Buttercup. And then, the goose arrived. Not just any goose. Sergeant Honkers. Sergeant Honkers had been watching this whole disaster unfold from a distance, judging everyone, waiting for the right moment. And when the moment came, he declared war. With a loud, aggressive honk, Sergeant Honkers spread his wings and charged. His first target? The groom. The man let out a strangled yelp as Sergeant Honkers locked onto his legs, flapping wildly, pecking at his expensive pants like he was trying to rip them apart. The groom tripped and fell backwards, landing right into a pile of manure. People gasped. Someone laughed. The bride? She screamed, "Jack!" Scams! No! Now, you'd think that maybe, just maybe, Karen would finally admit defeat. But no, she wasn't just mad anymore. She was furious. She whirled around to face me, her entire body shaking with rage. Jake, call them off right now. I popped another shrimp into my mouth, chewing slowly as I watched the absolute bedlam unfold around me. Can't, I said, completely deadpan. They live here. You're the trespassers. Karen's entire face turned purple. I'm calling the police. I grinned. Oh, please do. I'd love to see how they handle an unauthorized wedding on private property. And just like that, Karen's rage flickered. Her mouth opened, then closed. Because she knew. She knew she was screwed. But before she could respond, there was a loud crash behind us. One of the cows had wandered over to the drink station and, with a lazy flick of its head, had sent the entire table of champagne bottles tumbling over. The sound of shattering glass mixed with the horrified wails of guests, who had just realized they were now standing in a mixture of dirt, manure, and very expensive champagne. I took a deep breath, the scent of pure karma filling my lungs. Karen, however, was having a full-blown meltdown. She turned to the bride, her voice desperate now. Sophia, please, it's just a minor inconvenience. We can still salvage this. Sophia, who was holding the ruined remains of her veil in her hands, shaking with rage, snapped her head toward Karen. Karen, she hissed, her voice trembling. You ruined my wedding. The groom, still covered in manure and still fending off Sergeant Honkers, turned on Karen next. This was your idea, he spat, brushing feathers off his ruined suit. You told us everything was taken care of. Karen, now looking genuinely panicked, raised her hands defensively. Wait, now let's just take a deep breath. The bride's father, who looked about 5 seconds away from committing a crime, stepped forward. Karen, he said, his voice dangerously low, we paid you thousands of dollars for this wedding. Thousands. Office dollars. Karen gulped. Then, almost like the universe wanted to hit the final nail in her coffin, sirens echoed in the distance. A hush fell over the crowd. The police had arrived. Karen's eyes widened in panic. The officers stepped out of their squad car, taking in the absolute war zone of a wedding. A cow licking cake off the grass. A goat standing proudly on a knocked-over speaker. Guests covered in dirt. And Sergeant Honkers, still victoriously flapping his wings over the defeated groom. One of the cops adjusted his belt and sighed. Okay, so whose property is this? I raised my hand. Mine. The officer nodded. And you didn't authorize this event? Nope. The officer turned to Karen. So, you charged people for an event on land you don't own? Karen's face drained of color. Well, it was for the community. The bride's father shoved his phone in the officer's face. Here, look at the receipts. We paid her. Thousands. The officers exchanged glances. One of them pulled out a notepad. Ma'am, we're going to need you to come with us for questioning. The gasp from the guests was audible. Karen screeched. No, this is ridiculous. I didn't do anything wrong. One of the cops raised an eyebrow. Ma'am, you charged people for an event on land you don't own. That's fraud. Karen's jaw dropped. The officer nodded toward the squad car. Come on. Karen sputtered. She turned to me, her face twisted with rage. This is your fault, Jake. I smiled. Oh, did I tell you to steal my land? No? Huh. Sounds like a you problem. And with that, Karen was hauled off to the police car. The guests, now fully done with the entire situation, began grabbing their things and making their way out. The bride, still fuming, turned to me one last time. For what it's worth, she muttered. I'm sorry. I nodded. Next time, maybe check who actually owns the venue before handing over thousands of dollars. She sighed and trudged away. The last car finally pulled out of my driveway. The sound of sirens faded into the distance. I exhaled. Sergeant Honkers strutted past me, fluffed his feathers, and let out one last, triumphant honk. I patted him on the back. Good work, soldier. Then, without another word, I turned and walked back inside. Best wedding ever. The morning after the wedding fiasco, I woke up to something truly beautiful. Silence. No music, no entitled laughter, no clinking champagne glasses, just the peaceful sounds of my farm. Birds chirping, cows lowing in the distance, the occasional rustling of the wind through the trees. I stretched, feeling a satisfaction I hadn't felt in a long time. Karen was gone. Her guests were gone. And my land. Mine again. But of course, peace on my farm never lasted long. My phone buzzed from the nightstand. I groaned, debating whether I should ignore it, but curiosity got the better of me. It was my farmhand. Boss, he said, amusement laced in his voice. You might want to come outside. I sighed. Why? You've got visitors. That was never a good sign. I dragged myself out of bed, threw on some jeans and boots, and stepped outside, only to find an official-looking city vehicle parked near my fence. Two men in button-up shirts and slacks stood near their truck, surveying my land like they were about to grade a construction site. And standing beside them, waving a thick folder of documents like it was the Constitution, was Karen. I laughed. I couldn't help it. The woman got arrested yesterday and she still had the audacity to show up on my property. I made my way over, arms crossed. Morning, gentlemen. Something I can help you with? One of the men, probably some kind of inspector, gave me a polite nod. Mr. Jake, we received multiple complaints regarding violations on your property. We're here to conduct an inspection. My eyebrow twitched. Complaints from who? The second inspector cleared his throat and glanced at Karen, who immediately put on her best concerned citizen face. From several members of the Homeowners Association, she said sweetly. You see, Jake's farm animals are causing disturbances, and after yesterday's incident, we also received concerns about zoning violations. I blinked at her. Zoning violations. Karen nodded solemnly, clutching her folder like it was a holy relic. Yes, I'm afraid your land might not be in compliance with the community's standards. I stared at her for a long moment, then looked at the inspectors. Let me get this straight. Karen steals my land for a wedding, gets arrested, and now I'm the problem? Karen sighed dramatically. Jake, it's not about the past. It's about moving forward and ensuring our community is a safe and peaceful place. I bit back a laugh. Safe and peaceful. Karen, you literally had Sergeant Honkers attacking your guests yesterday. Karen flushed, but quickly turned back to the inspectors. Regardless, the community has raised valid concerns. One of the inspectors nodded. We just need to take a look around, Mr. Jake. If everything checks out, we'll be on our way. I exhaled, running a hand through my hair. Fine, be my guest. Karen smirked. That smirk told me everything. She thought she won. She thought she was about to dig her claws back into the HOA, get her revenge, and make my life hell. Too bad she forgot one small detail. I had nothing to hide. The inspectors walked the property, making notes, checking fences, looking at my barn. Karen trailed behind them like an eager schoolgirl, pointing at random things. The fencing looks old, don't you think? She said, nudging one of the inspectors. That could be unsafe. The inspector scribbled something in his notebook. She gestured toward the pond. His animals have free access to the water. Is that even regulated? The second inspector hummed thoughtfully. She pointed at a pile of fresh cow manure. And look at this. The odor alone must violate some kind of health code. I sighed. Karen, it's a farm. Farms smell like farms. The first inspector chuckled, but quickly masked it with a cough. Karen's smug expression never wavered. She was already mentally drafting whatever ridiculous complaint she was about to file next. But as the inspection dragged on, that smugness slowly started to crack. Because nothing was wrong. The inspectors double-checked my zoning permits. Everything was legal. My land was properly registered for agriculture. My fences were up to code. My animals were well kept. And best of all, they couldn't find a single violation. Finally, the first inspector closed his notebook. Well, Mr. Jake, everything appears to be in compliance. Your farm is operating within all legal requirements. Karen's smirk vanished. What? The second inspector nodded. Your zoning is correct, your animals are within regulation, and we don't see any safety concerns. Karen's eye twitched. But the noise, the smell, the goose, he attacked people. The first inspector raised an eyebrow. Ma'am, farm animals on a farm are not a violation. Karen looked like she might explode. But... The inspectors snapped their notebooks shut. If there's nothing else, we'll be on our way. Karen was fuming. She opened her mouth, probably about to argue, but I beat her to it. Hey, Karen. She turned to me, her face bright red with rage. I grinned. Guess you should have checked the zoning laws before trying to pull this stunt. Her fists clenched at her sides. You, she hissed. You think you're untouchable, don't you? I shrugged. Nah, I just know how to read property laws. Karen took a threatening step forward. I'm going to find a way to make you pay. My smile faded. Karen, I said, voice calm, steady, and just the tiniest bit amused. The only reason you're not sitting in jail right now is because I didn't press trespassing and fraud charges. Karen froze. I took a slow step forward, my arms still crossed. If I were you, I continued, voice dropping just enough to make her stiffen, I'd walk away before I changed my mind. For the first time, I saw real hesitation in Karen's eyes. She swallowed, her lips pressing into a thin line. Then, without another word, she turned on her heel, stomped to her car, and sped off down the road. I exhaled, watching the dust settle. My phone buzzed again. A text from one of the HOA members. Emergency HOA meeting tonight. Karen is losing control. Thought you'd like to know. I stared at the message. Then slowly, a grin spread across my face. This question mark. This was going to be fun. The HOA meeting that night was going to be a bloodbath. I debated whether I should even bother going. After all, I wasn't in the HOA. But the fact that they specifically invited me, that meant one thing. Karen was losing. And that was something I had to see for myself. So, after finishing up some work on the farm, I dusted off my jeans, hopped in my truck, and made my way over to the community clubhouse. The second I walked in, I could feel the tension. The room was packed, more people than I'd ever seen at one of these meetings. Usually, HOA meetings were just a bunch of bored retirees arguing about fence colors. But tonight, it was personal. Karen sat at the head of the table, stiff as a board, her hands clenched into fists. She looked like someone who had been fighting a losing battle all day. And judging by the angry whispers and glares being thrown her way, she knew it. The HOA board members sat across from her, their expressions ranging from annoyed to outright livid. The bald guy, who I recognized as one of the higher-ups, cleared his throat. All right, he said, rubbing his temples. Let's get to the main issue at hand. We all saw what happened yesterday. We all know who was responsible. Karen straightened her back, plastering on the last remnants of her fake smile. Yes, and I think we need to discuss the real issue, she started. The woman sitting closest to her scoffed. The real issue? Karen, you stole money from residents. You lied about the wedding venue. You nearly got us all sued. Karen flinched. I was thinking of the community. That wedding was important. It brought embarrassment, someone snapped. A murmur of agreement rippled through the room. You made us look like idiots, another board member said, shaking his head. And now? Now we're legally liable for what happened. Karen's smile was gone. Her eyes darted from face to face, realizing she had no allies left. The bald man sighed and pinched the bridge of his nose. Karen, there have been discussions about a vote. Karen's entire body stiffened. A vote? Yes, he said, to remove you as HOA president. The room fell silent. For the first time in years, Karen looked genuinely shaken. You can't do that, she stammered. I built this HOA. I kept it running for years. And in those years, the woman near the front said, you fined people for stupid things, forced unnecessary rules, and now you've cost us thousands of dollars. Karen's hands gripped the table so hard that her knuckles turned white. I have always acted in the best interest of this community, she snapped. The bald man exhaled, rubbing his temples. Karen, let's not drag this out. We already have enough votes to remove you. Her face drained of color. No, she whispered, shaking her head. No, you don't. The man with glasses, who had been silent until now, pulled out a stack of papers. We do, he said. Karen's breathing grew shallow. You can't do this, she said, voice rising. I refuse to step down. The bald man exhaled. Karen, you don't have a choice. One by one, the members raised their hands. Karen's eyes darted around the room, desperately searching for someone, anyone, to defend her. But no one did. Even the few members who had supported her in the past kept their hands firmly in their laps, avoiding eye contact. It was over. Karen's jaw clenched as the realization sank in. She had lost. Completely. Utterly. Her power, her control, her precious HOA presidency, all of it gone. A heavy silence hung in the air. I figured now was a good time to speak. Well, I said, leaning against the doorframe, looks like the community finally decided what's best. Karen's head snapped toward me, her eyes filled with pure hatred. This is your fault, she hissed. I tilted my head. Oh? Did I tell you to steal money? Did I tell you to throw a wedding on private property? Did I tell you to lie to everyone here? Her lips pressed into a thin line. She had nothing to say. The bald man cleared his throat. Karen, you have 1 week to vacate your position. After that, we will elect a new president. Karen stood up so abruptly that her chair scraped against the floor. Without another word, she stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind her. A collective sigh of relief filled the room. For the first time in years, the HOA members looked like they could breathe again. As I turned to leave, the bald guy called after me. Jake. I stopped, raising an eyebrow. Yeah? He nodded. Thanks. For everything. I smirked. Don't thank me. I gestured toward the farm animals still roaming my property. Thank the cows. The room chuckled. I walked outside, taking in the cool night air. Karen was done. She had spent years controlling people, bullying them, treating them like her personal subjects. And now, she had nothing. A few days later, I got an unexpected visitor. The bride. She stood at my gate, looking sheepish. I crossed my arms. Something I can do for you. She let out a small laugh. Well, I just wanted to say I'm sorry. For everything. I had no idea Karen was lying about the venue. If I had known, I never would have gone along with it. I studied her for a moment, then nodded. Fair enough. And the lawsuit? She winced. Yeah, that's not happening. My dad is suing Karen instead. He's furious. I chuckled. Can't say I blame him. She hesitated, then reached into her bag and pulled out an envelope. This is for you. I took it, opening it to find a check. I raised an eyebrow. What's this for? She sighed. The damage. I know the wedding wrecked your land. It's the least I can do. I considered refusing, but then I thought about all the cleanup ahead. I nodded. Appreciate it. She gave me a small smile, then turned to leave. Take care, Jake. As she walked away, I glanced down at the check. It wouldn't erase the insanity of the past week, but it was a decent ending to the whole mess. Sergeant Honkers strutted past me, fluffing his feathers like a true victor. I patted him on the back. You and me both, buddy. Then, with one last satisfied breath, I walked back toward my house. Peace had finally returned to my farm. For now.